The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the most beautiful place in the known universe. Crystal pillars rose toward a ceiling that showed the live image of 1,000 stars. Representatives from 47 different species sat in floating chairs arranged in a perfect circle. Their bodies were strange and wonderful. Some had scales. Some had feathers. Some looked like walking trees or floating clouds of light. In the center of this circle stood one man. He was alone. Kong Jay wore a simple black suit. He had no weapons. He had no guards. He stood with his hands folded behind his back and watched the aliens around him with calm, dark eyes. He was 63 years old, but he looked younger. His hair was gray at the temples, and there were small wrinkles around his eyes from years of smiling at creatures who hated him. For 300 years, humanity had sent diplomats to this hall. For 300 years, they had been ignored, insulted, and turned away. Earth was a probationary world. Humans were considered too young, too violent, too dangerous to join galactic society as equals. They were trapped in their own solar system, watched by satellites. Forbidden from traveling to the stars. Kong Jay was the 14th diplomat to stand in this spot. He knew the names of all 13 who came before him. He carried their failures like stones in his pocket. Today would be different. High Arbiter Velos floated down from his platform. He was tall and thin, with silver skin and 4 arms. His species, the Vetherani, had ruled the council for 6,000 years. They believed they were chosen by the universe itself to lead all other life. Velos looked at Kong Jay the way a person might look at an insect on their food. "Human representative," Velos said. His voice echoed through the hall. "You have been called here to answer for your species' crimes." Kong Jay did not move. "What crimes, High Arbiter?" Velos waved one of his hands. A hologram appeared in the air, showing images and documents. "Your species has been conducting illegal research. You have been building weapons. You have been planning violence against peaceful galactic citizens." Evidence was fake. Kong Jay knew it. Everyone in the room knew it. But truth did not matter here. Power mattered, and Earth had no power. "These accusations are false," Kong Jay said simply. "The Council has reviewed the evidence," Velos replied. "We have found humanity guilty. The sentence is war. Your planet will be occupied. Your species will be corrected." A murmur of approval went through the hall. Delegates nodded their heads or made sounds of agreement. Some of them smiled. They had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Humans made them uncomfortable. Humans asked too many questions. Humans did not know their place. Commander Dreth, the leader of the galactic fleet, stood up from his seat. He was a massive creature, covered in thick blue armor that was actually his own skin. His species were born warriors. They had never lost a war. "My fleet is ready," Dreth announced proudly. 200,000 ships. We will reach Earth in 40 standard days. The humans have no fleet, no weapons, no hope. This will not be a war. It will be a cleaning. Laughter filled the hall. Kong Jay stood still through all of it. His face showed nothing, but inside his chest, his heart was beating fast. Not from fear, from something else entirely. In the corner of the hall, Ambassador Lyrith watched with worried eyes. She was small and covered in soft white fur. Her species were scholars and scientists. They studied other civilizations. Lyrith had spent 40 years studying humans. She had read their history. She had learned their languages. She had walked on Earth itself, disguised as one of them. She was the only one in this room who was afraid. "High Arbiter," Lyrith spoke up. Her voice was quiet but clear. "I must advise caution. Humans are not what they appear to be. They are primitives," Velos cut her off. "They still fight each other over resources and ideas. They destroy their own planet. They're barely more advanced than animals." "That is exactly why we should be careful," Lyrith said. "They fight each other because they are strong enough to survive such fighting. Their planet tried to kill them with ice and fire and disease, and they survived. They are enough." Velos raised his hand. "The decision is made. The war is declared." He turned back to Kong Jay. Do you have anything to say, human? Do you wish to beg for mercy? The hall fell silent. Everyone watched the small, alone figure in the center of the room. Kong Jae lifted his head, and he smiled. It was not a nervous smile. It was not a sad smile. It was the smile of a man who had been waiting for this moment his entire life. It was the smile of a man holding a secret so big that it could shake the stars. Lirith saw that smile. Her blood went cold. Beg? Kong Jae said softly. No, High Arbiter. I will not beg. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. It was just a communicator, simple and old. But when he pressed the button on its side, he sent a message across the galaxy at faster-than-light speed. The message was only 3 words. The cage is open. What was that? Dreth demanded. What did you just do? Kong Jae put the device back in his pocket. His smile grew wider. For 300 years, he said, you kept us locked in our system. You watched us. You laughed at us. You thought we were building nothing, planning nothing. You thought we were sitting in the dark, crying and waiting for you to save us or kill us. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every delegate. You were wrong. Bellows made a sound of disgust. Take him away. Lock him up. He is clearly insane. Guards moved forward to grab Kong Jae. He did not resist. As they pulled his arms behind his back, he kept talking. You gave us 300 years, he said. 300 years to watch you, to learn from you, to prepare, and now you have given us the one thing we needed. And what is that? Velos asked, annoyed. Kong Jae looked at him with eyes that suddenly seemed much older and much more dangerous. Permission. As they dragged him from the hall, Lirith stood frozen in place. She was thinking about everything she had learned about humans. Their history of war, their ability to adapt, their strange habit of becoming stronger when pushed against a wall. She thought about a human saying she had once read, "Do not wake a sleeping dragon." The council had not just woken the dragon, they had told it exactly where to find them, deep beneath the frozen ground of Siberia. There was a city that did not exist on any map. It had no name. The people who lived and worked there simply called it the Project. For 300 years, generation after generation had been born, raised, and died in this underground world. They had one purpose, one dream, one secret. Dr. Minho walked through the metal hallways with quick steps. He was a thin man with messy hair and tired eyes. He had not slept in 2 days. Around him, thousands of workers rushed in every direction. Alarms were ringing. Lights were flashing. After 3 centuries of waiting, the signal had finally come. The cage is open. Minho entered the main control room. Giant screens covered every wall, showing images from across the solar system. He walked to the central platform where General Tay was already standing. Tay was an old man. His back was straight and his eyes were sharp. His grandfather had started the project. His father had continued it. And now, Tay would finish it. How long until full activation? Tay asked without looking away from the screens. For hours, Minho replied. All systems are green. The fleet is ready. Tay nodded slowly. 300 years. My grandfather died believing this day would never come. My father died hoping it would. And now here we are. On the screens, the view changed. It showed the space beyond Neptune, in the cold darkness at the edge of the solar system. For any outside observer, there was nothing there. Just empty space and a few floating rocks. But when Minho pressed a button on his console, the truth revealed itself. Ships. Thousands upon thousands of ships. They had been hiding in the asteroid belt, covered in special material that made them invisible to all sensors. Now, their engines were waking up. Blue fire began to glow in the darkness. What looked like empty space became a wall of metal and power. 10,000 warships. Each one built in secret. Each one carrying weapons that the galaxy had never seen. Minho felt tears in his eyes. He had worked on these ships since he was a young man. He had given his whole life to this moment. It's beautiful, he whispered. Far away on the bridge of the command ship, Heaven's Fury. Admiral Yuna received the activation order. She was a woman of 50 years, with short gray hair and a scar across her left cheek. She had been a pilot, then a captain, then an admiral. Every step of her career had been preparing for this war. She stood up and looked at her crew. They were young and old, men and women. Some were crying. Some were praying. Some were just staring at their screens in shock. "Listen to me," Una said. Her voice was calm and strong. "For 300 years, our grandparents and parents built these ships. They trained our pilots. They developed our weapons. They did all of this knowing they might never see the result. They did it for us. They did it for this moment." She walked among her crew, looking at each face. "The Council thinks we are weak. They think we are alone. They think their 200,000 ships will crush us like insects." She smiled. "They are about to learn something important about humans." "What is that, Admiral?" asked a young officer. Una's smile grew cold. "We do not break. We bend, and we wait, and we survive. And then, when the time is right, we hit back so hard that our enemies never forget." She returned to her command chair and pressed a button. "All ships, this is Admiral Una. Begin final preparations. We move in 3 hours." Across the fleet, 10,000 ships came to life. Pilots ran to their stations. Engineers checked every system. In the weapons bays, soldiers prepared for battle. The waiting was finally over. Back on Earth, in every country, in every city, the news spread quickly. The secret was out. Governments revealed the truth they had hidden for so long. Factories that officially made cars were actually making fighter ships. Universities that officially studied science were actually developing weapons. The whole planet had been working together in secret, united by one simple truth. The galaxy wanted to destroy them. And they would not let that happen. People gathered in the streets. They looked up at the sky. They knew what was coming. War. Real war. Against enemies with technology far beyond anything humans had faced before, but they were not afraid. In a small apartment in Seoul, an old woman watched the news on her television. Her name was Grandma Bora, and she was 97 years old. Her son had worked on the project. Her granddaughter was a pilot in the Hidden Fleet. A reporter on the television was asking people how they felt about the coming war. "Grandma." Bora laughed softly and shook her head. "How do we feel?" she said to her empty apartment. "We feel ready. We were born ready. Our ancestors survived ice ages and plagues and wars. Our great-grandparents survived occupation and bombs. Our grandparents built a country from ashes. What is one more enemy? What is one more fight?" She looked at a photograph on her wall. It showed her granddaughter in a pilot's uniform, smiling proudly. "Go show them, little one," Grandma Bora whispered. "Show them what we are made of." At the edge of the solar system, Commander Dreth's galactic fleet was approaching. 200,000 ships, filled with soldiers who had never known defeat. They were laughing and joking, already planning how they would divide Earth among themselves. Then, their sensors detected something impossible. "Commander," an officer said, his voice shaking. "We are detecting a fleet. A human fleet. The size is... It is... Spit it out," Dreth demanded. 10,000 ships, Commander. They appeared from nowhere. And their energy readings... The officer looked up with fear in his eyes. "Their weapons are not inferior to ours. They may be superior." Dreth stared at the screen. His blue skin turned pale. This was not possible. Humans were primitives. They had no technology. They had no fleet. This had to be a trick, some kind of illusion. But deep in his warrior's heart, Dreth felt something he had not felt in 100 years. Doubt far behind him. In the prison cells of the council station, Kung Jae sat in the darkness. He could not see the fleet. He could not hear the news. But he knew what was happening. He could feel it. He closed his eyes and smiled. The cage was open. The dragon was awake. And the galaxy would never be the same again. Captain Sora sat in the cockpit of her fighter ship. The Iron Wolf, around her, 499 other ships flew in perfect formation. They were the first wave, the tip of humanity's spear. Their job was simple: make first contact with the enemy and show them exactly what they were facing. Sora was 34 years old. She had been training for this moment since she was 6. Every day of her life had been preparation for war. Simulators, drills, exercises. Her teachers had been harsh and demanding. They had pushed her past every limit she thought she had. Now she understood why. "First wave, this is Captain Sora," she spoke into her communicator. "Enemy fleet in visual range. Remember your training. Remember why we are here. Our ancestors crawled out of caves and looked up at the stars. They dreamed of reaching them. Today we prove that dream was not foolish. Today we prove that humanity earned its place among the stars." Her pilots responded with silence. They did not need words. They were ready. Ahead of them, the galactic fleet spread across the blackness of space like a metal ocean. 200,000 ships, each one covered in weapons and armor. They were beautiful in a terrible way. Perfect machines built by civilizations that had traveled between stars while humans were still learning to make fire. "Commander?" Greth watched the approaching human ships with anger in his eyes. He had demanded more information about the human fleet. But his officers could not explain how the primitives had built such things. It did not matter. Numbers were numbers. He had 200,000. They had 10,000. The math was simple. "Target the lead group," Dreth ordered. "Full weapons fire. Destroy them all." Thousands of galactic ships turned their weapons toward the first wave. Energy built up in their guns. They prepared to fire, and then the humans did something unexpected. Instead of flying in a straight line, easy targets for enemy weapons, the first wave scattered. They broke formation and spread out in what looked like chaos. But it was not chaos. It was a dance. For centuries, humans had fought each other in wars on land, sea, and air. They had learned lessons written in blood. Never give your enemy an easy target. Always move. Always adapt. Always surprise. The galactic fleet fired. Beams of energy cut through space, bright enough to blind anyone looking directly at them. But the human ships were not where the weapons were aimed. They had already moved. Sora felt her ship shake as an energy beam passed close enough to heat her hull. She did not panic. She had trained for this. She rolled her ship sideways, dived beneath another beam, and accelerated toward the enemy line. "First wave, begin attack run," she ordered. Her squadron moved with her. They were not flying in formation anymore. Each pilot was making their own decisions, reacting to the battle as it unfolded. To the galactic officers watching, it looked like madness. There was no order, no pattern. How could you fight an enemy that had no pattern? But there was a pattern. It was just too fast, and too complex for the aliens too. Understand? The human ships reached the galactic fleet and opened fire. Their weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had. Dr. Minho and his team had spent 3 centuries studying every piece of alien technology they could find. They had learned how galactic shields worked. They had learned their weaknesses. The human weapons bypassed those shields completely. Blue fire erupted from the human ships. Where it touched galactic vessels, metal melted and exploded. Ship after ship broke apart, spilling fire and bodies into the vacuum of space. On his command ship, Dreth watched in horror as his forces died. This was not possible. Human weapons could not hurt his ships. His shields were impenetrable. His armor was unbreakable, but the evidence was right in front of his eyes. In 30 minutes, the first battle was over. 12,000 galactic ships were destroyed or disabled. Human losses. 40-7.Dreth ordered a retreat. For the first time in his long military career, he ran from an enemy, far away. In the council chambers on Axiom Prime, the ruling delegates watched the battle footage in silence. No one laughed now. No one made jokes about cleaning up the humans. High Arbiter Velos stood frozen, his forearms hanging limp at his sides. His silver face had turned gray. "This is not possible," he whispered. "They are primitives. They have nothing. We watched them. We monitored them. Where did these ships come from? Where did these weapons come from?" Ambassador Lyrith stepped forward. She was not surprised. She was not shocked. She had tried to warn them. For decades, she had tried to warn them. They came from 300 years of patience, she said quietly. 300 years of watching and learning and waiting. You locked them in their system and thought that made them weak. But it did not make them weak. It made them focused. Every resource they had, every brilliant mind they produced, all of it went into one goal, this moment. Velos turned to look at her. You knew? You knew about this? I suspected, Lirith replied. I studied them, remember? I learned their history. These are creatures who survived everything their planet threw at them. Ice ages, diseases, predators. They did not just survive. They conquered. They took wolves, one of the most dangerous animals on their world, and turned them into pets. They took fire, which burned their forests and killed their families, and turned it into a tool. They took the atom, the building block of all matter, and turned it into a weapon. She looked at the frozen image on the screen. Human ships, dancing through the fire of battle. And now, she continued, they have taken the greatest empire in the galaxy and turned it into an enemy they can defeat, because that is what humans do. They take things that should destroy them, and they make those things their own. Velos sat down heavily. His authority, his confidence, his entire worldview had crumbled in 30 minutes. What do we do? Someone asked. No one answered. In the prison cell far below the council chambers, Kong Jay could not hear the battle or the discussions above, but he could imagine them. He had spent his whole life studying the council. He knew how they thought. He knew how they would react. A guard came to his cell. The alien looked confused and a little scared. The High Arbiter wants to see you, the guard said. Kong Jay stood up slowly. He brushed dust from his simple black suit. He straightened his collar. Of course he does, Kong Jay said pleasantly. Lead the way. As he walked through the corridors of the station, Kong Jay saw the fear in every face he passed. Aliens who had looked at him with contempt now looked at him with something new. Respect, and the war had only just begun. Admiral Eunice stood on the Bridge of Heavens, fury, and watched the full power of humanity's fleet move into battle. 10,000. Ships spreading across the darkness like a school of fish made of steel and fire. Behind them, Earth hung in space, a small blue dot that looked so fragile and so precious. Admiral, her communications officer reported, Commander Dreth has reorganized his fleet. He is preparing for a second attack. 180,000 ships remaining. Una nodded calmly. The enemy still had overwhelming numbers. But numbers were not everything. Begin Phase 2, she ordered. Start the broadcast. Cross every communication channel in the system. Cross frequencies that every species in the galaxy could receive. A message began to play. It was not a speech. It was not a threat. It was something far more powerful. It was human history. Images and videos flooded the galaxy's networks. Ancient cave paintings and modern cities. Horse-drawn carts and spacecraft. Plagues that killed millions and the medicines that stopped them. Wars that destroyed nations and the treaties that rebuilt them. The message showed humans at their worst. Battlefields covered in bodies, cities burning, children crying among ruins. It did not hide anything. It did not pretend humans were perfect. Then it showed humans at their best. Hands reaching out to help strangers. Scientists working through the night to save lives. Ordinary people standing against impossible odds because they believed in something greater than themselves. And finally, it showed humans surviving. Again and again and again. Ice ages, asteroids, diseases, dictators. Every single time the universe tried to destroy them, they found a way to continue. On the galactic ships, soldiers and officers stopped what they were doing to watch. Many of them had never learned anything about humans except that they were primitives to be conquered. Now they were seeing something different. Something that made them uncomfortable. These creatures were not weak. They were survivors. And they were very, very angry. Commander Dreth slammed his fist against his command chair. Turn off those transmissions. Block them. Cannot, Commander. An officer replied nervously. They are on every frequency. Our systems cannot block them all. Dreth's face twisted with rage. He had been humiliated once already. He would not be humiliated again. All ships, forward attack, he roared. Destroy them all. The galactic fleet surged forward. 180,000 ships against 10,000. The numbers should have been overwhelming. But Admiral Yuna had read human history too. She knew something that the galactic commanders did not understand. Throughout human history, smaller forces had defeated larger ones many times. The key was never numbers. The key was strategy. Execute the Hannibal formation, Yuna commanded. The human fleet appeared to retreat. They pulled back, moving away from the charging galactic ships. Dreth saw this and laughed. They were running. The primitives were finally showing their true cowardly nature. But it was a trap. As the galactic fleet pushed forward, human ships curved around them like water flowing around a rock. They did not run away. They repositioned. Within an hour, the galactic fleet found itself surrounded. Human ships attacked from every direction. Small, fast attack craft harassed the larger galactic vessels while the main fleet struck at their command ships. The enemy could not focus their fire because the threat was everywhere at once. General Tay watched the battle from Earth's command center, directing the overall strategy. Beside him, Dr. Minho was preparing something special. Is it ready? Tay asked. Myth nodded. The Prometheus array is online. You sure you want to use it this way? Tay looked at the screen. He could order the array to destroy enemy ships. It had the power. But destruction was not the goal. We are not fighting to become monsters, Tay said quietly. We're fighting to prove we deserve better. Disable them. Do not destroy them. Minho pressed a button. Across the battlefield, 100 galactic ships suddenly went dark. Their weapons stopped firing. Their engines stopped burning. They simply floated in space, helpless and silent. But they were not destroyed. The crews inside were still alive. The Prometheus array, humanity's most powerful weapon, was not a weapon of death. It was a weapon of control. It could shut down any ship's power systems from light years away. It could destroy, but it chose to disable. The message was clear. Humanity could have killed them all. It chose not to. Commander Dreth watched his ships go dark one by one. He did not understand. Why would the humans show mercy? This was war. There was no mercy in war. Unless the humans were not fighting the same war he was. A communication came through to his ship. It was Captain Sora, leading her squadron through the heart of his formation. Commander Dreth, Sora said calmly, your fleet is surrounded. Your weapons are ineffective. We have the ability to destroy every ship you have, but we do not want to do that. Surrender now, and your crews will live. Continue fighting, and we will be forced to stop holding back. Dreth stared at the screen. Behind him, his officers were whispering. Many of them were looking at each other with confused expressions. The humans were offering mercy. After everything the Council had done to them, after being locked away and treated like animals for 3 centuries, they were offering mercy. Why? On Axiom Prime, the Council delegates were asking the same question. 3 species had already sent messages to Earth, requesting separate peace talks. They did not want to fight this war anymore. They'd seen enough. High Arbiter Velos refused to accept defeat. He ordered more ships to be sent, more soldiers to be recruited, but his authority was crumbling. No one believed in victory anymore. Ambassador Lirith visited Kang Jae in his cell. The guards let her in because no one was giving orders anymore. She sat down across from him and asked the question that was burning in her mind. Why? Why do your people show mercy? You could destroy the fleet. You could attack the Council worlds. You could make us pay for every year of suffering. Why hold back? Kang Jae looked at her with tired but peaceful eyes. Because he said slowly, we remember what it feels like to be powerless. Remember what it feels like to be conquered and controlled. If we do to you what you did to us, we become you. We did not fight for 300 years to become the same monsters who caged us. He leaned forward. We want something better. For us and for you. That is why we fight. Not for revenge. For change. Lirith was silent for a long moment. In all her years of studying humans, she had never fully understood them.
Oh.
Finally, she was beginning to. They were not just survivors, they were builders. Even in the middle of war, they were trying to build something better. It was the most dangerous thing about them, and it was beautiful. The war ended not with fire, but with silence. Commander Dreth surrendered his fleet after 3 more days of fighting. He could not win. Every tactic he tried, the humans countered. Every formation he used, they broke apart. And through it all, they kept disabling ships instead of destroying them. By the end, his surviving officers were begging him to stop. When he finally transmitted his surrender, Dreth expected to be executed. That was how wars ended in the galaxy. The losers died, instead. Captain Sora greeted him with a simple nod and escorted him to a comfortable room on a human station. She gave him food and water. She treated his wounds. She called him Commander with genuine respect. "I do not understand you," Dreth said to her. "I came to destroy your world. I laughed at your people." Sora thought about the question for a moment. "Because hate is heavy," she said finally. "We carried it for 300 years. Had to, or we would have forgotten why we were fighting. But now the fighting is over. I do not want to carry that weight anymore." She left him alone with his thoughts. On Axiom Prime, the Galactic Council collapsed. 23 species withdrew from the Alliance within a week. High Arbiter Velos tried to maintain control, but no one listened to him anymore. He had led them into a war they could not win against an enemy they did not understand. His time was over. A new gathering was called, this time not as a council, but as an assembly. Representatives from all 47 species came together, but now they sat as equals. No floating platforms. No levels. Just a circle of chairs, and in the center of that circle, a human flag. Kong Jay was released from his cell and brought to the assembly as humanity's representative. He had spent weeks in that small room waiting and hoping and trusting that his people would succeed. Now he walked into the hall with his head high and his eyes clear. The same aliens who had laughed at him now stood when he entered. "Mr. Kang," the temporary speaker announced, "Earth has requested that you address the assembly. Do you wish to speak?" Kong Jay looked around the room. He saw fear in some faces, respect in others, curiosity in many. This was the moment he had dreamed of his entire life. "Yes," he said, "I will speak." He walked to the center of the circle. The same spot where he had stood when war was declared. The same spot where he had smiled and sent the signal that changed everything. 3 centuries ago, Kong Jay began, your council looked at humanity and saw something dangerous. You saw creatures who fought each other, who destroyed their environment, who seemed unable to live in peace. You decided we were a threat that needed to be contained. He paused, letting his words settle. You were right. Surprise moved through the room. They had expected anger, not agreement. We are dangerous, Kong Jay continued. We are violent and passionate and unpredictable. These things are true, but you made a mistake. You thought containing us would make those qualities disappear. Instead, you gave us a target for all that passion and violence. You gave us an enemy to unite against. You made us stronger. He turned slowly, looking at each delegation. I did not come here to gloat. I did not come here to demand revenge or payment. I came here to say this. We do not want to become the new council. We do not want to rule over you or control you or contain you. We want something that this galaxy has never had. What is that? Someone asked. Partnership, Kong Jay said simply. Real partnership. Not one species above others. Not one power controlling everything. A true alliance, where all voices matter. Where all species have the same rights and the same responsibilities. Admiral Yuna watched the speech from her ship, orbiting Axiom Prime with the human fleet. Her war was over. Now came the harder part. Building peace. Dr. Minho was already on his way to the assembly, carrying plans for sharing human technology with anyone who wanted it. The weapons, the engines, the power systems. Everything humanity had created in secret would now be shared openly. Some of his colleagues had argued against this. Why give away their advantage? Why make themselves equal? when they could stay superior? Minho had answered them quietly, because being superior is not the same as being free. As long as we keep these secrets, we are still defined by the Council's fear. Only by sharing do we prove that we have truly moved past what they did to us. General Tay retired from military service the day the peace treaty was signed. He had accomplished everything his family had worked toward for 3 generations. The cage was not just open, it had been dismantled completely. Captain Sora was promoted to Admiral. She led humanity's first official diplomatic mission to a world that had been forbidden to humans for centuries. When she stepped off her ship onto alien soil, surrounded by creatures that had once wanted to destroy her people, she felt nothing but hope. Ambassador Lyrith became Earth's first alien resident, moving to Sol to serve as a bridge between humanity and the galaxy. She spent her days teaching and learning, sharing the knowledge of 100 worlds while absorbing everything humans could teach her. One evening, she asked Admiral Yuna a question that had been bothering her for months. "When you had the power to destroy us," Lyrith said, "why did you choose mercy? It would have been so easy to become conquerors." Yuna looked out the window at the night sky. Earth's moon hung bright and silver above the city. "When I was a child," Yuna said, "my grandmother told me a story. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors were conquered by an empire. We were enslaved and controlled for generations. When we finally won our freedom, we had a choice. We could become like our conquerors, or we could become something better." She turned to look at Lyrith. "We chose better. It was harder. It took longer. But we became a culture that remembers its suffering and uses that memory to treat others with kindness. That is who we are. That is what 300 years in your cage could not destroy." The galaxy changed slowly after that. Old hatreds did not disappear overnight. There were species who still feared humans and humans who still resented the aliens. But the foundation had been laid. For the first time in galactic history, there was hope for genuine equality. Years later, Kong Jay stood on the observation deck of humanity's first embassy ship, looking out at the stars. He was old now, his hair completely white, his face lined with age. But his eyes were still sharp and full of wonder. A young officer approached him. "Ambassador Kong, we're approaching the new colony world. Is there anything you need?" Kong Jay smiled. It was the same smile he had shown the Council when war was declared, but softer now, warmer. "No," he said. "I have everything I need." The officer hesitated. "Ambassador, what happens now? The war is over. The Council is gone. What comes next?" Kong Jay looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were exploring worlds no human had ever seen. Somewhere out there, aliens and humans were working together for the first time. Somewhere out there, the future was being built. "Now," Kong Jay said softly, "now we do what humans do best. We build, we dream, we reach for what is next." He pointed at a distant star. "Do you see that? That is where we're going. Not to conquer, not to control, just to see what is there, just to learn, just to grow." The young officer looked at the star. It was so far away, just a tiny point of light in an ocean of darkness. But humans had been looking at stars since. They first walked upright on their small blue world. They had always wondered what was out there. Now, finally, they had the chance to find out. Not as prisoners. Not as servants. Not as threats to be contained, as equals. As explorers. As builders of a future that belonged to everyone. The embassy ship moved toward the stars and humanity. At last, was exactly where it belonged.